we had started playing around with a small application that, yes?
So I'm just a little bit confused still about like what exactly the scope variable is and does, and like where exactly, like what kind of data it holds.
Right. So I'll go over that, but basically it's the binding between the view and the controller.
Okay.
Right. It allows the two to communicate amongst each other using an object-oriented mechanism. Right. So that they can shuffle data back and forth, objects and primitives back and forth between the controller and the view, so that they can communicate with one another. It's the main mechanism by which they communicate.
Okay.
It's the I believe I mentioned yesterday that it's a small model. It's the model with a small m, as opposed to big model, as we'll see a little later as we make this a little more sophisticated. So it's the little model within the user interface, right, to bind the data for that user interface. Yes? Yeah. Right, so we had started working with implementing a small application to demonstrate implementing single-page applications. We had created a little to-do app, right, where you can create to-do entries, and you would want to show them as a list of to-do items. Let me run this to demo, and it would be located in, let's see, localhost. It's under the public directory, so it's under the public, it's under lectures, it's under afternoon, and there's the index. All right, so let's navigate there. So it's lectures, slash, and this is afternoon, and there is, let's see, afternoons, and there's the application right there. Is that it? Okay, there it is. So this is what we had yesterday, and where you could type something and add it. Right, just create several to-do items, and they're added to the list. I believe we also got to removing this. Yes. All right. So we got to those pieces, right? So and basically the domain object here is the to-do right, that has just one single attribute, which is the title. We could expand it. Maybe you could have just a title and maybe a little description of what it is actually that you need to do. But that is the entity. And right, for each entity, typically you want to build the 4 or 5 CRUD operations. You're going to be able to create them. You have to be able to read them, either read one individual one or read several as a collection that might meet a particular criteria, or just read all of them. Then we should be able to update them and remove them. So it looks like we've done at least 2 or 3 of those CRUD operations, right? We can definitely create them. We can remove them. We can list all of them. So we still need to see if we can create an update and create a read one, a single one of them. So let's review the implementation. We have the to-do list app, which is this one right here. We have the input field, which is bound to an object that has an attribute title, and this is bound to the scope, right? So anything that the view declares as a local variable is bound to the scope variable that we mentioned earlier. We'll see a little later that there's a couple of best practices that we're not doing right now, we're not implementing right now, just a little shortcut. So right now everything is off of the $ scope. Okay. Also, this function is also as well declared off of the scope. Right. So any function that we're referring to here are all referring to functions or variables or objects off of the scope. So the button here is invoking presumably an add-to-do function that is declared on the controller, and the controller we had declared it here as the to-do list controller. We said that this div, right, this view, this snippet of HTML template is the responsibility of this controller. That is the one responsible for shuffling data back and forth between the view and the controller. Is also responsible for handling any event handlers, any events that the user generates, such as clicking on this button. Okay. So yeah, it's declared here in a separate JavaScript as a constructor here that gets instantiated and then made available to anyone who refers to it by name. Here we have this to-do object, right? And notice that it's declared off of the scope object, right? Which gets passed to us. So it's bound to this variable right here. So this to-do is bound to this to-do right here. So anything that the scope does to the to-do or the view does to this to-do, right? It's double bind. They both get notified and see what that value is. We're also binding an array of to-dos that we initialize as empty, and that we add the to-dos when we click on the button. We pass the to-do object so that it can then be, which is defined right here, all right, that we then add to that, we push onto the to-dos array. Yes? Right? And since it's declared off of the scope, the view knows about it. Right? Anything that happens to this to-dos array, right, the view gets notified if something gets pushed onto it or spliced off of it, or any modifications to the objects inside of the array, the view gets notified and it gets re-updated. Okay? Once it gets pushed, we're using that array of to-dos right down here as an attribute of the ngRepeat directive or attribute, and which uses it to iterate over that and bind each instance in that array into a local variable to-do, which is then used to render the title as part of each li. Okay, make sense? Everybody okay? All right. Okay, we also went along, in addition to that, we started adding, we also added RemoveToDo. So each li, we added a RemoveToDo function that we can pass the index of the current iteration as an argument over to the RemoveToDo. Okay, and we receive the index, and that index we use it as an argument to splice so that we can remove that particular object instance from the array, right? And again, because that array is bound to the scope, anybody who's listening to it or anybody is observing the value of this to-dos gets notified, and including this ngRepeat, right? It's observing the value of to-dos, so it gets notified that it has changed. And it goes on and re-updates the list. Okay. Now this might be an issue, or might seem an issue if you had hundreds of items, right? And you might say, well, if you're removing just one, what does this do? Does it repeat again and re-render 99 elements, right? Even if you're removing just one? Well, no. If Angular is smart and keeps track of what object in memory is being used to render what piece of the DOM, right? So it knows that this DOM object is used to render this snippet of HTML, right? So that if that object is destroyed, right, it knows that it needs to remove the corresponding div or li or snippet of HTML and remove it from the DOM, right? So it's very efficient. It doesn't need to re-render, right? Just throw away the old UL, right, and just re-render the entire UL. Notice that that's much more efficient than perhaps in a server-side application where you have to submit this to a server, right? The server needs to remove the data from some data structure, and then go back to pass back the entire page re-rendered, right? And we have to re-render the entire document. That would be very, very inefficient. This one is very, very efficient, right? It removes that one object for that one template. Okay, very, very efficient. Let's see, what else? So that's remove. We pass the index, and we use it to splice. Notice that there's no need for the controller to somehow tell the view to re-render, right? The view knows that it has changed and it updates. Yes.
So if you have a list of 50 elements and you remove one,
yep,
then because it has separated into these zones, it's going to know that it needs to just re-render one of them.
Yes.
But in order to change the way the whole thing looks, because we need to move the other 49.
Yeah, no, that's the. So what happens is that so when you add these things, let's add 1, 2, 3. 2, 3, 4, and 3, 4, 5, right? So every time this is happening, right? If you notice if you inspect this and you look at the HTML, you notice that it has this UL over here, and notice that the LIs are right here, right? So if you add just one brand new one, what's happening here is that we JavaScript and the Angular framework underneath just added this LI, okay? And so this is the object representation of what's on the left-hand side is being rendered. Okay, and so the mechanism is that to update the user interface, you modify the DOM, right? And so if this is removed, even if I click on it and I delete, right, if I do a delete on my keyboard, notice I remove the DOM from the DOM. It's gone, right? That object representation is not there anymore. And notice that the left-hand side re-updated. See that? Right. So basically, you are updating this object model. That is always being listened by the view on the left-hand side, and that's the browser's normal mechanism, right? It has its object representation, and whatever the object happens, always represents what's being rendered, right? So the trick here is for JavaScript to either modify this object, right, removing it, adding it. It is the browser's responsibility to just re-render that tree.
So it does re-render, that's what I'm saying. At the end of the day, it does need to re-render all
That's the browser's normal mechanism, yes. But we're not doing that, right? Right, we're not doing that. Okay, so we removed it. We removed it. Angular doesn't like that, okay? Because Angular keeps track of all these objects. It says I have this object and I have this DOM, this user interface. It has this one-to-one mapping. It doesn't appreciate that others modify the DOM underneath, right? And we'll come back to it a little later when we consider other libraries such as jQuery, which is another very powerful library for manipulating the DOM, and they both are going to compete for the DOM, right? Angular wants to manipulate the DOM, and also jQuery wants to manipulate the DOM, right? And they don't play nice. This is because Angular has a very strict understanding of what this model is, right? What objects were used to render this, and how that is rendered. So we'll come back to that a little later. Okay, so if I remove this, right, notice that the LIs are removed, right? So we're manipulating this object on the right-hand side, and the browser just regularly, whatever happens to this object gets just re-rendered on the view. Okay, it's not our responsibility; it's the browser responsibility. All right. Okay, so let's continue. So what I wanted to show you or point out here about this idea that Angular keeps track of these objects, right, per template. So this, each one of these LIs that gets rendered, right, Angular keeps track what object was originally used to render that particular LI, right? To demonstrate that, I'm going to change this $. Index. Instead, I'm going to pass to-do. Right? Now, the importance here is that notice that the to-do object, right, is being rendered. Right? Several of these were going to be created, 3, 4, 5 of these LIs. Right? For each one of them, if I click on that span, it'll remember. Oh, that was the particular instance that was used to render that particular LI. Okay. So that if I do that, if I go back to the implementation of remove, here I'm no longer receiving just an index, right? I'm actually receiving the actual to-do instance that I want to remove. Okay, and so now I don't have an index, right? I don't have an index. Let's not remove it just for a second. Let's do the console, okay, and see what that to-do object is. So if I add 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4, and 3, 4, 5, and clear this. Notice that if I click on this, notice that the object is 2, 3, 4. See that? It knows that particular object was used to render that LI. That's why it's passing me that to-do object. See that? If I click on this one, it'll pass me 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3. So notice that there's an additional meta information, right? That Angular, right, adds to our objects. Right, those objects. Angular adds some meta information so that it can keep track, right? It has its own hash table, its own lookup table, right? So that it can keep track of what object is managing. These are where these are managed objects. They're not regular, just plain old JSON objects. Well, they are, but it keeps adds additional meta information so that it can keep track of what particular object was used for what particular LI. Okay, and that's how it's able to implement features such as pass by reference, right? That this object, if you pass it around, anything happens to that object gets propagated to everybody else, right? So that's part of that framework, right, of keeping track of these objects. Make sense? Right? So this is a little preferable than before. Instead of using the $ index, this is a little more object-oriented, right, than just using an actual index, right? But going back here, our only way of actually splicing something out is that we actually need an index, right? So we have to kind of like unwrap this this object mechanism and calculate now what the index is. And that's okay, right? Because objects is when they're pushed onto an array, right? They're pushed by reference. We can always find, we can retrieve, we can calculate the index and ask the original array. We can ask the original array, hey, array, you have these objects, references in there. Look up, find me the index of this to-do object inside of that array, right? By pointer. By reference. So look it up, see which reference matches, and then tell me where you find it, right, and give it back to me. Right? So now we've calculated the index, and then we can use it in here. Make sense? Right? So if I refresh this, hopefully should behave the same way we're moving. Okay? Yes?
So if you have exactly two same like list, so which one it will like
if you have
you add 2, 1, 2, 3.
So these are copies, right? Even if they have the same content, right? They're not the same reference, right? They happen to have the same value, right? And notice that that as far as Angular is concerned, they're two separate instances. See that they happen to have the same value 2, 3, 4, right? But it adds its own meta information to know that these are entirely different instances. And we're copying them anyway, right? We used this new to-do. We created a brand new instance.
But you use the index of, so if the to-do are the same, so the index will be the first one.
No, it's not using the values at all, right? It's using the pointers, right? And saying whichever pointer is pointing to that to the one I'm looking for, right? So if you go to and I looked at the elements and I have the two LIs, you have this LI and you have this other LI, right? They both happen to have the same value, 2, 3, 4, and this also has 2, 3, 4, right? But they're different instances, right? This one, it's bound to one object, which happens to have a title of 2, 3, 4, and this is bound to a completely different object, which it also happens to have the value of 2, 3, 4, right? It's just like you having the same name as someone else, right? But you are you, and that person is someone else, right? Right? You have an identity. Okay. Also, I wanted to point out another mechanism for copying. Right. This is certainly a valid way of copying, but it would be very expensive if you had hundreds or dozens of attributes. Right. So a more common way of copying is to use a mechanism that would copy. So var something like var new to do, and instead of doing one by one, we can use one of Angular's utilities that allows you to copy, and you can pass it the actual object that can copy it. Right. This does a deep copy. Right. If this object has other objects inside, arrays, and it goes on and on and on. Right. It will traverse the entire object, do a deep copy, right, and give you a copy of the original object. All right. So this is just a little more convenient, and hopefully this doesn't blow up, and it works just the same. Everybody okay? All right. All right. So we made some refactorings of the RemoveToDo. We made some refactorings of the add-to-do. Let's keep going. All right. So let's now add the capability of being able to update, right, or manipulate an existing object, right? So for instance, I would like to maybe to add here kind of like maybe like a pencil or a cog or something that if I click on it, I mean to update this or manipulate that particular instance. So let's add a cog, right? Like settings, right? I want to modify this. So it'll be a span class glyphicon. So it's glyphicon and again glyphicon. Oh, it's not using type ahead. It's not finding any of my classes, and that's because we're using a remote CSS, right? That's being downloaded from the network. I believe I installed a local copy of Bootstrap. Yes, I did. There it is. So because I'm lazy, I'm going to load that local copy instead of using the CDN. On production, you would never do this, right? In production, when it gets deployed, right, you want to link to CDN, right? But for convenience purposes, as you're developing, let's link to a local copy. So this would be go to, let's see, to a local, I think it's CSS, and then go down to Bootstrap. There it is. And rel style sheet. Okay. Oh no, that's not going to work either. Because I only brought the Bootstrap admin. I didn't bring any of the fonts. I didn't bring any of the. Yes.
Are you going to post all this code?
Yeah, I'll push this right after class. Yeah. Yes.
So why is it better to wait for the CDN in production?
So all these CDNs, right? The only reason of existing is that presumably they're going to be up and running 100% of the time. They are fairly popular amongst developers, and typically the big companies that use these CDNs, so that by the time they get to you, by the time they get to your page, chances are that they have already downloaded this library, right? So what the browser does is that it parses your HTML. It looks at your source and says, oh, Google something Angular. Oh, I have that already, right? Because I visited Amazon or I visited Netflix or I visited one of these bigger websites, right? So chances are that by the time they get to you, that you're not yet as famous as these websites. Chances are that they already have it, and the browser will say, oh, I already have it. I'm not going to re-download it. Instead, if you are hosted yourself, the browser is going to say, ooh, I wonder what that Bootstrap file is. I don't have it. Let me download it. Even though it probably already has a copy, but not from your domain, from somebody else's domain. Right? So it says, I don't have that. Let me download that. Yes?
Is there an issue if we choose to use it from our domain? Like,
No.
For example, for the IDE, like it gives you like hints on what to type next.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm doing.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I'm adding it like this. Yes.
Is there any way to like have it so that you can have both of them at the same time?
Yes. Yeah. WebStorm can be configured to cache the CSS to be used locally, but not the JavaScript, unfortunately. Yeah. So it creates like a small copy locally, so it doesn't re-download it, and you can still use the type ahead. Yep. All right. So I have Bootstrap here, and if I run this again, notice that it's going to break. it's going to break. Let's see. And the reason it broke is that I downloaded Bootstrap, but I didn't download any of the fonts, any of those things. You can reinstall that. You can go to Terminal, and you see in these node modules. You can install any library, including CSS libraries, Angular libraries, anything you want. You can say npm install. And for instance, let's install Bootstrap. So what this is going to do is going to go out to the server, and there it is, Bootstrap. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy what I need from the distribution, and I need these three. I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to move them. Typically, you would automate this in a deployment script, right? You know, copy all these libraries, put them in the right place when you're going to go to deployment. Okay. And typically there's deployment engineers that are tasked with doing just that, making sure that all these deployments are deploying correctly. All right, so I'm going to put that in here. Let's see. Typically, whenever you are downloading somebody else's library, typically you create a directory vendor that you put in everything that is somebody else's library, so it's not yours, right? And for instance, and then in here you might split it up into two directories. Any JavaScript libraries that you're downloading from someone else, and any CSS libraries that you're downloading from someone else. So in particular, we're going to put in there the Bootstrap library, Bootstrap, and that's one of the vendors, right? And in here, we're going to paste those three directories in there: the CSS, the fonts, and the JavaScript. Yes.
Is it like ever an issue if you have to like navigate too far down into a directory, like or if you're like just going to like several different nested files? Will it ever cause like a
No, it isn't. It isn't. Nope. So the organization of the file system typically that's something that you'll all agree as a team when you go out there in industry. And some teams, smaller teams, tend to have a very flat document tree, right? Bigger teams, right, where you have lots of features, lots of different gadgets and widgets, right? They will have a very deep tree, right, to break it up, right? Typically, just the organization is only to deal with complexity, so that we can say, well, this team is just working under this side, and this team is working on the other side, right? Again, all these organization is irrelevant if you're working on something trivial, right? It only makes sense if you're working on larger applications, large teams, right? And where you have an engineer dedicated only to this, to organizing the file structure and whatnot. All right, so here's my CSS. Let me grab it from my new location. So it's from where? Let's see. So it's I went up and I think it's vendor, right? Vendor, CSS, and then Bootstrap, CSS / Bootstrap. Okay. If we refresh, let's see. That didn't work either. Wait, what? What's going on here? Why is it not that working? Inspect. Glyphicon. Oh, did I break that? Glyphicon Glee? Oh, I stopped typing mid-sentence? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, we got the X back. And the other one that I needed, the other Glyphicon that I wanted was a Glyphicon. Notice that it's now filling up for me. See, it's typing ahead. I want the Glyphicon and I want the cog somewhere. Cog. There it is, Glyphicon cog. And I wanted to also pull it to the right-hand side. And let's see what that looks like. That doesn't look right. Oh, I need to close the span. Let me close the span. There it is. So we got a cog, right? And we can change the order of these two by changing the order of these two spans. Right. Okay, so if I click on that cog, what I want to do is I want to be able to edit that this item. So let's see what could we do here. So we could let the controller know that we have clicked our cog, and this will be that I want to select. This is the to-do that I want to select for editing, right? So select to-do, and we can pass in the index or the to-do. It's up to you. Let's keep it simple. Let's pass in the index. So on the controller side, we can listen for that incoming event handler, right? So we say scope select to do, and then reference to a local function that implements that. So function select to do, and here's the index. And what we're going to do is that basically we need to populate our form, right? Let's populate our form, and that form is it's kind of simple, right? Let's make it a little more interesting. Let's add not just an input field. Let's also add maybe a text area. text area, and let's add the ng model, maybe with like details of the to-do, details, and the same class form. So form control. So yeah, so one of them will have the title of the to-do and maybe in the description or details. Maybe we want to add some labels here. Label, and this would be the title, and maybe another label on top of it for the details. Right, title and details. Right, so if I add this, right, they're added. Notice that I don't have the details, so maybe the details we could render it perhaps how? Let's see, we could render maybe the title, we could render it as an H3, and we can maybe render the details, we could render it maybe as a paragraph, render the to-do details. And we can maybe populate the initial details for the initial that first form with some lorem ipsum. Right, so that if I add it, notice that we have lorem ipsum. That doesn't look right. Did I not close something? The header. Oh, there it is. Sorry. Thank you. So if I add it, you get title and you get you can add a whole bunch of these, right? Oh, wait. What happened there? Oh, right, because we empty it, right? So this is 1, 2, 3, and this is lorem ipsum. Add. There we go. So we can add a whole bunch of these. Yes? Everybody okay? All right, so I want to be able to select these. So to select it, what we could do, right, since we have the index, what we want to do is maybe populate this field, right? Populate all the fields that we want to update, right? So what we could do is just say, we could do something like $scope, right? This object here, right? The input field in the text area. Right, are both bound to the to-do object, right? So I can just populate the to-do object, the $to-do. So we can do, $scope to-do is equal to grab it from the array, and say index. Yes, right? So let's see if that works. So we say add, and if I click on the cog, it populates it, right, for selection. Yes. Anybody see any problems here? Yes.
It gets duplicated by this.
Uh,
You actually remove it from the original index, so when you hit add again, the add is going to make it a new object anyway.
Yes, almost. Yes. So what happens if I start typing here? It's going to change the original, right? Right. If I start typing, because what happened here is that this is an object, right? That lives in this array. That has a particular pointer, a particular address, and I'm just assigning it to do, and it's by reference, right? So anything that now happens to that to-do object is going to be updated. Now your point, though, right? If I add it, and notice that when we add it and we select it, right? This one gets modified, the original one, but not this one. Why not? Because when we add it, we are copying, right? We are copying. So we need to do something similar when we select for editing. We have to do something similar, right? We have to copy it back into the object. We don't want it to just pass an instance. Although maybe that's what you want, right? Maybe that is what you want, right? That if I add it, if I want to update it, I just add it in place. Maybe that's okay. Maybe that's indeed what you want, right? It's almost like editing in place, right? It's almost as if I can click and these will convert into input fields, right, or text area. I can edit in its place. Maybe that's what you want to do, right? That'd be cool. Yes.
Yeah, but how are you gonna start adding a new one?
Right. I don't have a mechanism to do that, right? We need to, there's no way for me to like empty and then add a new one, right? Yeah. Good point. All right, so definitely I'll need to copy this. And we just learned how to do that, Angular copy. allows it to just copy that and pass it around. Again, this would not be an issue if everything were passed by value, but because it's passed by reference and things are maintained by reference, you have to understand when things are when it is a reference or when it's a copy, right? And same thing with other languages when you have to reference or dereference, right? You have to a pointer. So same thing here. So this then, let's see if I select it. Now I can modify with modifying the original. Yes.
You have references or pointers in those?
References. Yeah. It's almost like in Java they're handles. We call them handles. Yes.
So I know that in other programming languages, the construction of objects are like performance heavy, and so does this, like, if you had to copy a lot of things, if you're like adding and constantly removing and adding things,
Yeah.
would that actually cause like a performance issue on for, I guess, if it was like a really heavy application?
All right. So it depends. Yes, you get a performance issue, right? Of traversing the object. Typically, you want to not copy the entire thing, and you want to turn off nested recursion of the entire object, right? And only pick out certain things.
Okay.
So you can turn off deep copy, right? You just want to do a flat copy, which only copies the first layer of the objects. Yep. But again, like anything, you'll need to weigh in the frequency that certain things happen. That perhaps some things are very expensive, but happen very frequently. Might be okay. And you would only care if this happens, very, very frequently, right? That you want to avoid these things. All right, so let's keep going. What I want to be able to do is actually update this, right? And so I need an additional button, right, to update. So let's create another button underneath. Notice that this is I'm kind of zoomed in, so you can't, it's hard to read a little bit. But notice that I've started to add white spaces. Yes, I've started to add white spaces to make this code a little readable. It's also good practice to break up all the attributes in its own individual line. Again, so that other developers in the team find it easier to read your code. Okay, remember, whenever you're coding, you're not coding for yourself, right? You're coding for the rest of the team. Right? The rest of the team, typically, you'll go through some code review, right? And typically, your code will be assigned for someone else to review. Right? They'll read your code, and if they feel comfortable, maintaining your code, they will accept it. Otherwise, they'll reject and say, no, I do this, that, and the other, and then I'll accept it. Right? Again, your code doesn't belong to you. Right? It's a team effort. So whatever you can do to make everybody else's life simpler, please do. So single lines, it's a very common thing to do to make it just that much more readable. All right, so let's keep going here. So we've selected. We need an additional button. So let's add another button here for updating. So update, and then we would notify the controller that we want to update a certain object at a particular index, right? And that's the new object. Actually, no. If we are updating, we're updating the object that we just typed, right? The new values for the title, the new values for the text area. Okay, so if we refresh, notice that there's an update. Let's paint it a different color. Let's paint it green with success. Here in the Western world, success is green. I don't know if it has to do anything with the dollar of success. So here we go. We have the update, and we like to be able to call, select it, and then make some changes, and then click on the update, right, and make those changes permanent. So to do that, let's go back to the controller and create the event handler for this. So this will be scope dot update to do, and then update to do. And here we have a function with the update to do with the new values for to do. But somehow we need to remember what it is which one is it that you had selected for updating, right? So we can store that in a local variable. We could store it maybe here and make a note of that, right? That the selected index, right, is index, so that when we go back to the to-do, right, we could update the data at that location, right? We could say, scope dot to-dos at location selected index, right? We want to put back in there the to-do. And this is up to you, right? If you want to do a blanket copy, right, of the object, right, Angular copy of that to-do, or if you want to do element by element, right? It might be that you only update those elements that have changed. Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna get the index or like get it without actually saving the index like here. Like, can you like, is there like some Angular thing to like find it? 'Cause
Well, you could make it part of the. Typically, what all these objects will have unique identifiers, which we don't have right now. When we go to the database, right? Definitely, these will have primary keys, right? And all modifications would be based off of that key, right? So we don't have that now, but yes, everything will be.
Update at the wrong time.
I'm sorry.
If you like can update at the wrong time, which would it get?
True. Yes. So typically, what you would be doing is a primary key that would guarantee you that you're updating the actual object, and you have it maybe in a map where you can retrieve these by key. Yes.
But the hash codes here are unique in each DOM, right?
Those are meta. Those are meta information that is part of the framework, and we're not supposed to use them. Right? They're not guaranteed. Their values are not guaranteed.
So they're not guaranteed to be unique.
They are, well, yes, because that is how it keeps track about its uniqueness, but those values could change on you, right? And so you can't know what they actually are. It's like knowing the actual value of a pointer, right? You don't really care about the actual value of a pointer. You care how it works, right? Of referencing and dereferencing. Behind the scenes, you have all these values of pointers, but they're abstracted from you with the notion of a pointer, of the star and the ampersand and whatnot. Yes? Yes? Oh, no, okay. All right, so let's see if this works. And I select it, and I update something, and I update, and it modifies the original one. Yes?
If you, instead of just having like an add and update, like if you wanted to, when you hit select, like change like the add button to be like an update button instead.
Sure.
How would you do that? Because you'd have to like.
Typically what you would do is that you would have both of them in there, right? And you would hide and show them at strategic times.
Or
Yes.
you have some variable that indicates whether you have pressed the select and if the variable is set.
Sure. Yeah. Although in general it's a bad practice to overload the meaning of something, that it changes in user best human-computer interactions. You study that you would tend to have like a modal error where the user needs to remember what mode it's in, that you're in, or what particular mode the application is in, to remember that, if I do it this way, it does this. If I do it some other way, it will do something else, right?
Right, but if your variable is used also for entering things, not
Yeah.
an update button, so you don't have to remember it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Yep, sure. All right, so that works. So this select is kind of our read one, right? Retrieve one element, and we read it from our little toy lowercase model, and we read it, and we showed it in the form so we can update it and modify it. All right, everybody okay? Yes.
How did you change that when you click the little callback on it repopulated with one?
So it calls this function select to do, and it uses the index that it's passed as an argument to retrieve it from our array, right? We copied it and we assigned it to the to do object, right? Which is bound to the input fields, right? The input field and the text area. Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Yes.
Can you show me where you passed that index initially? Because I kind of.
It's in the select to do, right? It's iterating over all the objects.
Oh, I see. Because the loop. Okay.
Yeah, it's iterating over all the object, and you have that index there.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Let's see, what else? One more little thing. Here, when we add the object, we could add some additional meta information, right? Anything, maybe a primary key, perhaps, right? Just fake it for now because we don't have an actual database. So we could fake it, like new to do. Maybe ._id. That's how MongoDB, we'll see a little later, uses ._id as the primary key. And we could maybe fake it and say new date and then it says get time. So this is a unique identifier, right? It's the number of milliseconds or seconds that have occurred since, I don't know, 1970 or something. And time, it progresses forward. So because of the second law of thermodynamics, we have the get time. You have this value, and we can have this unique identifier. Right? We can fake it. I believe in the first or in the second or third assignment, we ask you to fake the primary keys this way, right? So this is an easy way, and it's forward compatibles when we get to the database, right? Because the database is going to use this identifier to unique identify all your objects. Plus, maybe we could do the date that the to-do was created. And we can also just create the date, the now date, right, and assign it as an actual object. And then we could render it. Right, we have now that it has dates. We could render it here, perhaps down below as maybe as a label. We could render the to-do date. Right. So there it is. So there's a time timestamp that gets added. That is the current date. Right. If I add another one, it's a few seconds later. Okay. And certainly we can format it. Angular provides quite a few formatters. If it's a date or a number or currency or whatnot, that you can use as pipes. We'll see a little later how we can create our own filters. Right, these are called filters that can take as arguments some piece of little data, parse it, and then format it and return some string that represents it in a different format. So if you say that this is a date, date is a standard Angular filter. Later on, we'll create our own, and it uses it basically just takes whatever's from the left-hand side. And formats it in some default string. So if we re-render that, the standard way is to have month, day, and year, right? Okay. We'll see later how to create our own. All right. Let's. I think we've gone far enough with the front end part, right, of creating this an Angular application. Notice if I create a whole bunch of these. They're added there, right? But notice that the server has no idea this is happening, right? This is only happening on the client side, on the browser, right? The server has no bearings here. If I refresh the page, everything is gone. Yes? No? Why are you not gone? It was still loading. All right, that took a while. Notice that everything's gone, right? I don't have my data anymore. So really, this is not an option, right? We really need to have the server participate here, right? The only way that we can store this is at least on the server instance, right? I think that's as far as we will be able to get today. But eventually, what we really want to put it is on the database, right? And store it, have not a little m like we're doing in here. We want a bigger m, right? The big model. So let's play around with that, and we'll do that in a separate video.